Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The courtroom was plunged into a heavy silence, broken only by the occasional creaking of benches and rustling of papers. Sunlight filtering through the tall windows illuminated the determined face of a black female soldier standing before the prosecution. Her impeccably pressed uniform contrasted with the tense atmosphere. Suddenly, a brutal gesture shattered the calm. A police officer, red with anger, raised his hand and slapped her in front of everyone. The sharp sound resonated like a whip crack, startling the audience. The murmurs exploded into a hubbub of shock and indignation. Faces turned pale. Some stood up in outrage, while others remained frozen, unable to look away. But she didn't flinch. Her eyes, blazing with defiance, fixed on the man who had just struck her. Every muscle in her body was tense, ready to react. Then, in one swift, precise movement, she grabbed the policeman's arm, used her military training, and swung him over with calculated force. The man hit the floor with a dull, jarring thud. The room held its breath. Silence fell again, even heavier than before, as eyes focused on her. The judge, pale, slowly stood up, his expression frozen between anger and respect. Everyone understood that this gesture was not just a retort, it was a clear warning, a reminder that force and contempt could not overcome his dignity. In that courtroom, that day, everyone knew that no one would be forgotten, that no one could ignore the courage of a woman who refused to be crushed. And in the middle of that icy room, the black soldier remained standing, motionless but invincible, staring straight ahead at her destiny. After the incident in court, the black soldier, her face still scarred by the injustice, was escorted out of the courtroom by officers charged with maintaining order. Each footstep echoed in the deserted corridor, her perfectly aligned uniform reminding everyone that she was no mere civilian. The humiliated police officer struggled to his feet, his lips split and his pride wounded. His eyes flashed, but deep down he knew his anger wouldn't change what had just happened. The audience was witness. The whole world seemed to know now, she wasn't someone to be disrespected with impunity. In the entrance hall, she passed a few military colleagues who looked at her with admiration mixed with concern. "You were incredible," one of them murmured. But she shook her head, her gaze fixed on the courtroom door, where the injustice had taken shape. She knew this was only the beginning. As she was about to leave, a voice stopped her. "Wait, you need to speak to the judge." She nodded, knowing that every word, every gesture would count from now on. The judge, still shaken by the scene, invited her to sit down. The consultation room was quiet, but the air was thick with tension. The truth had to be heard, but above all, she had to protect her honor and that of all those fighting for justice. And as she caught her breath, a thought crossed her mind: they underestimated my strength, but they will learn to never forget my name. The next day, the court resumed its sessions, but the room was still reeling from the previous day's incident. Journalists had already begun to pour in, their cameras trained on every face, capturing every expression. The crowd's murmurs, sometimes hushed, sometimes indignant, created an electric atmosphere. The black soldier was called to testify. She entered the room calmly, each step echoing like a declaration of strength. The police officer sitting opposite her gave a tight smile, certain that his position of authority might intimidate her again. But she didn't lower her eyes. The judge spoke, his firm voice restoring some semblance of control. "We will hear the facts in an orderly manner. Madam, can you tell us what happened?" She took a deep breath, then spoke with clarity and determination. "Yesterday, in this room, I was assaulted while in uniform, representing the army and the law. This act was not only a personal attack, but an affront to everything I stand for." The murmurs in the room died down. The police officer's lawyers tried to downplay the incident, but every word seemed to fall flat against the quiet force of his testimony. She didn't stop there. "I will not seek personal revenge," she said, looking the man straight in the eye. "But I will not remain silent. Justice must be upheld, and those who break the law must be held accountable." The police officer, visibly unsettled, looked away. His authoritative posture was cracking under the weight of his own guilt and the silent admiration of the audience. Some spectators murmured, "She did what we all wanted to do." At that moment, the judge banged his gavel to call for calm. The court will take all necessary measures to ensure that the honor and safety of all are protected. As she left the courtroom, her heart pounded, not with fear, but with conviction. She knew this wasn't the end. The repercussions went far beyond this courtroom. And somewhere, behind the eyes and the cameras, a much bigger struggle had just begun. The police officer, humiliated in front of the audience and the cameras, could not bear the thought of his reputation being destroyed. He decided to retaliate, thinking that a few behind-the-scenes maneuvers would be enough to reverse the situation. But he completely underestimated the determination and vigilance of the black soldier. In the days that followed, rumors began to circulate. She dared what she did in court. But instead of weakening her, each whisper strengthened her image. Everywhere she went, colleagues and civilians looked at her with respect and admiration. Her action was no longer just a response to an attack, it had become a symbol. One morning, as she was preparing for an official meeting with the military command, she received a message from the judge. "Your courage made an impression on the court. The situation with this police officer will be closely examined. Stay strong." The police officer, for his part, tried to influence his superiors, but each attempt backfired. Every testimony he provided seemed inconsistent, every act of denigration aroused suspicion and indignation. He was beginning to lose his footing, realizing that his attempt at domination would only sink him further. During a direct confrontation in an administrative office, he tried one last move, a threatening and condescending speech, hoping to intimidate her. But she remained motionless, her gaze hard and her hands crossed. Then, calmly, she said, "Your threats don't affect me. You've already chosen your defeat, and I've only reminded you of it." The policeman, unable to react, felt everyone around him holding their breath. Even his allies began to doubt him. For the first time, he understood that his anger and contempt could not triumph over justice and courage. At that moment, it became clear that the real battle was not physical, but moral. And that the one who held the initiative was none other than the black soldier, whose dignity and strength had already sealed her opponent's fate. Tensions were running high in the courtroom that morning. The room was packed, journalists, citizens, soldiers, and police officers, all present to witness what promised to be a decisive hearing. The air vibrated with anticipation, every whisper reflecting the excitement and nervousness of the audience. The black soldier entered, straight and determined. Her impeccable uniform gleamed under the lights, and her gaze, clear and unwavering, swept the room before settling on the judge. The police officer was already there, seated, visibly tense, aware that his fate depended on this hearing. The judge banged his gavel to call for calm. "We are here to review the events of the past week. Each side will have the opportunity to speak." The police officer tried to justify his actions, speaking with arrogance and contempt. But every word seemed counterproductive. His explanations rang hollow, and his aggressive tone only accentuated the impression of guilt. The audience began to whisper, and several faces expressed silent judgment. Then it was the black soldier's turn. She spoke calmly but with implacable authority. "Yesterday, I was beaten while in uniform, representing law and order. This was not a mere personal attack, but a violation of everything we stand for. I acted to protect my dignity and remind everyone that no one is above the law." Each word echoed through the room like a hammer on metal. The whispers died down, replaced by an eerie silence. Even the policeman looked down, unable to meet his gaze. The judge, after a long moment of reflection, made a decision. The police officer's behavior constitutes a serious violation of rules and professional ethics. Severe disciplinary action will be taken, and mandatory training on respect and dignity will be imposed. A murmur of approval rippled through the audience. The black soldier remained calm, but a slight spark of satisfaction shone in her eyes. She had won more than just a personal victory, she had reminded everyone that courage and integrity always triumph over brutality and contempt. As she left the courtroom, cameras capturing every moment, she knew this moment would be etched in the memory. Her response hadn't just chilled the room, it had inspired everyone who still believed in justice. The days following the verdict were intense. Local and national media outlets covered the black soldier's story, presenting her as a symbol of courage and resistance in the face of injustice. Her colleagues congratulated her, and some civilians approached her on the street to shake her hand or offer words of support. Within the police force, however, the tension was palpable. The officer who had hit her had been fired, and several of her superiors were beginning to re-evaluate their behavior and methods. Even those who thought they could ignore the situation understood that respect and ethics were no longer negotiable. For her, this recognition was gratifying, but she remained focused on her duty. Her military command entrusted her with new responsibilities, recognizing her composure and ability to handle situations under pressure. Each mission became a demonstration of her competence, and her natural authority became more assertive. One evening, as she was returning home, she received a message from a former military mentor. "You have shown what true courage means. What you have done will not only remain in the courts, it will inspire many people." She smiled slightly. The road hadn't been easy, but she knew she'd done more than stand up for herself. She'd paved the way for greater respect, fairness, and justice in an environment where the abuse of authority was too often tolerated. And as she looked out over the city from her apartment window, she realized that this moment of confrontation, which had chilled the courtroom, marked the beginning of a lasting change. The echoes of her strength and dignity would continue to resonate, long beyond this case. A few weeks after the court case, the black soldier thought she could resume her life and career. But an unexpected event arose to test her. One morning, while on her way to a strategic meeting, she received an urgent call from the military command. A serious incident involving several officers and a sensitive security situation had just occurred. She was immediately dispatched to the scene. Arriving at the scene, she found chaos, panicking officers, frightened civilians, and worrying rumors about a possible leak of sensitive information. Some were trying to downplay the seriousness, others were trying to take control of the situation, but nothing seemed coordinated. Without hesitation, she took command. Her firm, authoritative voice cut through the hubbub. "Everyone, listen to me. We must secure the premises and ensure the safety of every person here. Follow my instructions, exactly as I give them." Under her leadership, the teams began to organize themselves. Every move was precise, every decision swift and calculated. The situation, which had seemed out of control, slowly began to stabilize. The officers who had previously doubted her began to fully respect her, impressed by her composure and ability to act under pressure. After several hours, the crisis was brought under control. Those responsible were identified and sensitive information secured. The control room, which had been a field of chaos, now resembled a model of efficiency, thanks to its leadership. As she left, a colleague whispered, "You've once again shown what it means to be a true leader. No one else would have handled this like you." She nodded, tired but satisfied. The ordeal had tested not only her competence, but also her resilience and her ability to remain steadfast in the face of the unexpected. She understood that her courage in court was only a step, each day could demand even greater strength, and she was ready. The weeks following the crisis highlighted the exceptional value of the black soldier. Her swift and decisive action not only averted catastrophe but also exposed structural flaws in force coordination. The military leadership decided to re-evaluate its protocols, and she was invited to participate in the complete overhaul of security and crisis management procedures. Journalists, who had already praised her for the courtroom incident, began to nickname her the officer who never bends. Her image spread throughout the country, and young soldiers and civilians came to her for advice and inspiration. She became a model of courage, discipline, and resilience. Within her unit, respect for her had never been stronger. Those who had doubted her abilities began to recognize not only her competence, but also her integrity. Even the police officer who had humiliated her in court was confronted with the extent of her influence and reputation, realizing that his attempts at denigration had failed spectacularly. One evening, during a military ceremony, she was publicly congratulated by the command. "Thanks to your leadership and courage, we have learned to better protect our teams and to value each member for their skills, not their appearance or status. She received an honorary medal, but for her, the real accomplishment lay in the change she had inspired. Her actions had altered not only her career, but also the institution itself. As she left the ceremony, she realized that every challenge, from the courtroom to the security crisis, had forged an indestructible strength. She had not only gained respect and recognition, she had paved the way for a culture where courage and integrity prevail over contempt and arrogance. In his mind, one certainty: every future challenge would be faced with the same determination, and no obstacle could extinguish his will or his dignity. A few months after the security crisis, the black military thought it had overcome all challenges. However, a new incident arose, more subtle but just as dangerous. An internal investigation revealed that a network of corruption and favoritism existed within certain units. Colleagues were trying to cover up serious errors, and some senior officers were compromised. He was then offered a delicate position: remain silent and accept rapid promotions and benefits, or denounce corruption, thus risking his career and personal safety. She spent the night thinking. Each choice weighed heavily: on one side, ease and immediate recognition; on the other, the ethics, honor, and justice she had always defended. The face of the police officer who had beaten her in court came back to her. The lesson was clear: those who abuse their power must answer for their actions. The next day, before the command and the investigation officials, she spoke with unwavering firmness. I cannot turn a blind eye. Those who violate the rules and betray the trust of citizens and their colleagues must be held accountable. Justice must not be negotiable. Her decision caused immediate shock. Some immediately supported her, impressed by her courage, while others sought to discredit her. But she remained calm, determined, and unwavering. Her ethical choice would trigger a series of investigations and sanctions that purged corrupt units and reinforced the culture of accountability and transparency. It was a moment of reckoning. She understood that her role extended far beyond the courtroom or crisis management. Her strength lay not only in her physical abilities or her leadership, but in her ability to confront power and injustice with integrity. As she left the room, a respectful silence accompanied her. The looks around her expressed admiration, awe, and gratitude. That day, she knew she had blazed an irreversible trail. The power of courage and dignity could transform even the most corrupt structures. A few weeks after she exposed the corruption, tensions within the institution reached a peak. Internal investigations multiplied, and compromised officials were confronted with irrefutable evidence. But some still sought to discredit the black soldier, portraying her as a rebel or a troublemaker. As a large public hearing was held to present the findings of the investigations, the room was packed. Cameras, journalists, and officials scrutinized every face. The black soldier entered, impeccable and calm, her determined gaze sweeping over the assembly. Each step echoed with justice. The judge and the investigating officers laid out the facts: fraud, abuse of power, and systemic negligence. The faces of the guilty parties paled, some tried to find excuses, but their lies crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Then, in a solemn moment, the judge turned to her. Your courage, integrity, and determination have allowed the truth to come to light. Today, you not only protect justice, but you inspire all who believe in honor and responsibility. The audience erupted in applause. The black soldier remained silent, but a faint smile lit up her face. Her mission wasn't just to defend herself or protect her honor, she had just transformed the perception of the entire institution. Even the police officer who had beaten her in court watched, unable to look away. He understood, once and for all, that his attempt at intimidation had failed and that he had been defeated not by physical force, but by the moral courage and integrity of a woman who refused to be crushed. As she left the room, the applause continued to ring out. In her mind, she knew this moment would go down in history. She had not only survived injustice, but had also ensured that justice prevailed, leaving behind a legacy of courage and dignity that would never be erased. Within months of the public revelations and internal investigations, the black soldier had earned a reputation that extended far beyond her unit and even her country. She was now a symbol of courage, integrity, and resilience to all who had followed or observed her. In her office, surrounded by letters of support, young officers seeking advice, and messages of admiration, she took a moment to reflect on everything she had been through. Each ordeal, from the courtroom to the security crisis and then the exposure of corruption, had forged her strength and determination. The military command summoned her to a special ceremony. There, in front of her colleagues and superiors, she received an honorary distinction for her exceptional leadership and her contribution to ethics and justice within the forces. But even more than the honors, it was the respect and admiration of all those present that touched her deeply. Behind the scenes, the police officer who had assaulted her in court had been disciplined and relegated to administrative duties, a permanent reminder of the consequences of abusing power. His public humiliation, while painful for some to witness, confirmed the essential lesson of history: courage and dignity can never be crushed by contempt or brutality. As she left the ceremony, the applause still echoed in her ears. She took a deep breath, knowing that her journey had made a lasting impact. Her career, while brilliant, was no longer just a personal achievement. It represented change, inspiration, and proof that justice and respect could prevail, even in the most hostile environments. She knew, in that moment, that her legacy was not measured by medals or titles, but by the lives she had touched, the dignity she had defended, and the example she left for future generations. And as the sun set behind the windows of the military quarters, she smiled, proud and invincible, ready to face any new challenge with the same strength and integrity that had marked her story.